that's all. Before that, no Forest play. Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. And like a rubber ball, Forest come bouncing back again. I'm your host, Greg Oram, along with my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, Richard Spray.
Bounce back, watch me bounce back. If you think I'm taking losses, nah, I ain't about that. If you see me take a time out,
0-0 the score, in it goes near post, doesn't beat the first man, but it's a glancing header, and Anderson slides, and Forest are in front, deflected on its way through, but Forest have got the lead.
Watch Will, y'all. This is the bounce back.
How did that
Here
go
come
in?
the bounce back. Keep your eyes on him. This is the bounce back. With these mics, I feel like I'm Customato. 100 rounds of life, but still boxing my shadow. Yeah, I took a knee, never threw in the towel though. Hip hop's Messi, Neymar, and Ronaldo.
And that one shook out
Scored on these
for Chris
boys.
Wood.
I done won damn near every single award on these boys. Sold out movie theaters and even tours on these boys. Feeling like a mop wiped the floor with these boys.
Clear goal kick, and that is the final whistle. Nottingham Forest under Nuno Espirito Santo, the former Spurs manager, are third in the Premier League table.
Rubber ball, like I'm bouncing back to you. Rubber ball, like I'm bouncing back to you.
Ooh. Bouncing back. It's there, isn't it? We said, in the face of defeat, Forest have that bounce back ability. On show yet again, Mr. Spray.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the amazing part is, like, we had a away win, obviously, at Ipswich a few weeks ago, but to hit that mark and to be close to getting to 10 away wins in the season, when you think about the first two seasons, that's almost double what we did in the first two seasons, which is just incredible. I mean, it's just part and parcel of just breaking these ceilings, these glass ceilings this season, and as well as getting a double over the Spurs, who we've struggled with. And I think they said we hadn't beaten them in their home stadium and since 1997. So we just continue to kind of reverse these trends we've had, right? It's incredible, just incredible. Every single week, we just get more and more amazed by what our club's doing. It's amazing.
Well, let's be honest, it wasn't fun watching everyone else play before us, mainly because the wins they collectively achieved between them dropped Forest into sixth place ahead of kickoff at Spurs, and the pressure to win was intensified to the max. It looked as though the slip-up was on for many people, but no. Oh, no. Once again, following a setback, Nottingham Forest laid down their credentials, bounced back with another win on the road to do the Premier League double over Tottenham Hotspur. It wasn't pretty, especially in the second half. And I know it was Easter Monday, but the amount of crosses going into our box was enough to make even the Romans shudder. But a win is a win. And a vital 3 points puts the Reds back into third place with 5 Premier League games to play. With Richard and I as a man who had to suffer just that little bit extra last night because he was sat in with the Spurs fans. It's Paul Morley. Paul Morley, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you. Good to hear that intro music again. I think if you're watching this for the first time, you'd think it was me that used to work in one of those kind of places, wouldn't you? But as I'm sure,
I still live off the Red Thong story, mate. I have dreams about that story, actually, if I'm honest with you. No, it's good to have you with us, Paul. And if you're with us in the comments, please do let us know you're here, say hello and all that kind of stuff, and we'll say hello back. And if you're listening back on the Apple, Spotify playback later on, we thank you for joining us as well. We hope that you'll hit like and subscribe. Please do so. It helps the numbers. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can always leave a 5-star review, pass a comment over. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. We know some of you love the intros. We know some of you hate them. But hey, Talking Reds is a bit different. We're here to talk about Forest. Let's get into it. General thoughts, Richard Spray, on last night. Let's hear what you thought about that thrilling victory.
Yeah, it's much nicer to watch back the second half when you couldn't watch it the first time because you're at work, and so you're stuck in a conference call. And so I heard I saw the WhatsApp messages just flying through, and so I was like, all right, apparently it's not going that great. But it was nice to watch it back and not have the trauma of trying to endure that nervousness and already knowing the outcome. But yeah, the second half was definitely starkly different than the first half. I mean, just in general, I mean, you'll see, I think we have a graphic to show about sort of like the pressure rates and things like that in this match compared to like Everton, which we think is one of the worst matches we played all season. And statistically, I think Paul was the one who brought it up about how many touches we had in the box. I think we had double the number of touches in the penalty box at Everton than we did against Tottenham, which is shocking because, statistically it doesn't look great. But I think just the performance level across the board, when you look at each individual player, I think Morgan was probably the most average player last night comparatively, but there was a lot of good performances. Anderson was fantastic. Sells was great as usual. Milenkovic was his, usual Serbinator self and just, heading everything away and, playing as stout as he normally does. So it was just great to see it flip, the script flip in terms of performance level from the last match we had played. So definitely pleased about that, and seeing some guys come back like Taiwo, who've been injured. So hopefully we get Ola back soon, and then it will kind of feel like we have a full squad at our disposal.
You were there, Paul. How did it kind of feel? Obviously, not being able to sit in with the Forest fans, not something I've done it before, and it's not something I really like doing or would want to do again. But I guess you want to see the game live and you want to see it up close, and it is different when you're there. After all, I mean, from the television, I thought we got underway really well, and obviously we got the goals, which we're going to talk about. But how was it from your perspective?
Yeah, it's an interesting experience actually, sitting with the home fans last night. I mean, you talk about also the nervousness of the watch, particularly towards the end. I guess from my perspective, I was in with the Spurs fans, and although actually, having said that, there was quite a few empty seats around me for the whole game, but the general sentiment and feeling was pretty much of an air of resignation from as soon as it went to 1-0, pretty much. And even though they were pushing, most of the comments was, "Oh, we played till midnight, we're never going to score," and so there wasn't a huge amount of belief within their crowd that they were going to get back into the game and going to get anything out of it. So from that perspective, I guess it made me feel a little bit more relaxed. And that, all these Tottenham fans that sat around me, they've seen this movie, how many umpteen times this season where they go behind and they're out the game and they can't get themselves back into it. So and it's interesting. I wonder how much of that filters through to the players on the pitch. Whereas you've got the Forest fans who are, singing, making constant noise and just backing the team to the hilt, and that sort of energy helps get us over the line. So yeah, it was obviously it was nervous, but actually I think, as I said, being in with Tottenham fans who were pretty much resigned to the fact they were going to lose made me feel a bit more relaxed even when we were under pressure. But yeah, I think in terms of just general summing up of the game, I think it was, I think we said it before, after games like the Man U game a few weeks ago, it was quite reminiscent of that. Just, sort of sheer determination, will to win, guts, bloody-mindedness, loads of different sort of adjectives that you could use. But I think actually, on top of that, no shortage of sort of discipline and organisation as well. I know you talked about obviously the number of crosses coming in. I don't know if you listened to the post-match show on Forest Focus last night. Mark Southerns was talking about, clearly that was almost sort of a not a tactic to let them get that many crosses in, but essentially, back ourselves to deal with aerial balls into the box. And we obviously did that relatively well. If you're going to get 40, 50 odd crosses in, whatever it is, ultimately, they're going to probably get one right and they're going to score. But yeah, I think, what typified the performance, and I know I'm sure we'll talk about it, was obviously Toffolo's clearance off the line, just in terms of stepping up in the moment. And again, I don't think it's, although that was a brilliant moment individually, I don't think it's any coincidence that we've seen that several times this season from Forest players. I think Ola Reina did a similar thing at home to Southampton. We know Murillo has probably got the most goal line clearances in the league. So I don't think those things happen by accident. That the players are drilled, they know their jobs in those situations. If the cross comes in, if the centre halves don't win the header, if it goes past Sells, then somebody's job is to be there doing what Toffolo did, or as brilliantly as he did it. So I think you give credit to this organisation, the setup for those kind of moments as well, and not just sort of put it down to luck. So yeah, overall, absolutely thrilled with the 3 points. It feels huge. I mean, I went into it thinking it's not necessarily a must-win game, but it's probably a must-not lose. And to come out of it with 3 points, I think, puts us right back on track with the fixtures we've got coming up, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So, yeah, feeling great and feeling actually a lot more relaxed about the weekend and what's to come. It feels like that's a bit more of a sort of, I hate to use the word free hit, but just a bit more of a sort of bonus now, and we can go into that, players, fans, staff equally, all a bit more sort of upbeat, relaxed, without that intense pressure that if we'd had lost last night, all the noise that would have been around us, bottling the Champions League, which isn't obviously going to be there now, puts a whole different reflection on Sunday.
I want to say good afternoon to Jay in the comments. He says, I'm not sure what's more stressful, a relegation battle or the hunt for top 6. Bruce is asking, was that Buddy Holly at the end? No, that was Bobby V at the end of the intro this morning. And Ron, a Spurs fan, says that you lot are far better than us in every position. He says, well done. I hope you qualify for the Champions League. Ron, if you're still watching, we thank you very much for doing so and for your kind comment. Spurs are listen, I live in Cheshunt in Hertfordshire, right on the cusp of Tottenham, 15 minutes away from me, Tottenham Stadium. So I'm in a Spurs area. And, they've had such a funny season. And Big Ange comes in and he says all the right things to a certain degree at first. And he's that kind of lovable, roguish Aussie that kind of tells it here it is kind of thing. And I almost was making a call for him when Cooper was on the way out because he was doing well at Celtic, and I thought he could be the kind of guy that maybe would do well for Forest. And so when he's coming, I genuinely thought he was going to do well with Spurs, and they did get that bounce with him. But this season has been a really, really funny season, and I know they've had injury issues, but it still isn't coming together. And whether or not they choose to part company with him, I'm not sure that winning the Europa League and qualifying for Champions League will save his job. I don't know. I just don't know. But going into this one, it was the kind of game where, Forest, who have had a good season, as we know, albeit off the back of 2 defeats, I felt like we were going to have that bounce back ability again. I know I've said that relentlessly on this podcast, but we lose games or we lose a couple of games, and it's happened every single time that we've managed to come back, and we've done it again. Having said that, it was Spurs. It was at Spurs. It was another one of those teams that we hadn't beaten away from home since coming back to the Premier League and struggled with potentially. So it was a funny one. And I thought, yeah, I'm with you, Paul. Maybe a point would just be, let's get a point and get out of there. But having seen all the other teams around us get points, obviously, albeit Newcastle didn't because they lost to Villa, but it kind of left the door open. And we were talking in our WhatsApp group, well, look, if we get that win, it puts us back in third. And had Newcastle drawn or got the win, that wouldn't have happened. So it's an obvious thing to say, but the swings and the roundabouts and the connotations and the ifs, buts and maybes and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, we're going to drive ourselves crazy talking about that until now, between now and the end of the season. But this game in isolation, 3 points, I think massive, absolutely huge, because we rode our luck at times, more than rode our luck at times. I still think we let far too many crosses coming into the box. I mean, Pedro Porro had more crosses in this game than I think he's ever had. It really was silly. And I question that to a certain degree, because as much as Milenkovic and Murillo have been outstanding and continues to head the ball away, Morata does his thing as well, we still allowed them to score. And on another day, Sells doesn't save the one from Richarlison. On another day, we don't get the luck with Toffolo. And I know you're right, Paul, when you say it is drilled into them, because it's happening time and time again. But it was a tough watch in that second half for me. It was a real tough watch. And again, the fewest touches in the opposition box and to go on and win, I think, in God knows how long. The team news at the start was probably the main talking point, I guess. It was leaked. We all saw the leak, and rightly so. We kept it to ourselves. And if anyone does get the leaked team and then decides to publicise it, I don't think that's the right thing to do. But it was leaked, and I know the club aren't happy about that, and they're looking into it. But Toffolo coming in from Moreno Richard was the main talking point. Danilo, another talking point coming in. No Yates. Yates can't play on Sunday because he's suspended. So how surprised were you that Ryan Yates didn't start last night? I'm a huge Dominguez fan, and I thought last night he showed again with his coverage of the pitch just how important he is for us. But curiously, Toffolo does get the first start of the season in the Premier League. What did you make of all of that?
Yeah, I don't know if, maybe Nuno had a premonition that they were going to be doing something like that. He probably saw something on film with all these crosses, and you have to get guys in there, I think, who have that ability to, even though he's not 6'1", 6'2", you know what I mean? He's not from a stature standpoint, but he's got some pretty decent athleticism to him, and he's been able to manage things aerially pretty well. And so maybe that's part of the reason he thought he should be in there. Maybe he thought he's just a bit of he may not have the attacking capability of a Moreno, maybe not be as good on the ball as a Moreno. And Moreno certainly played brilliantly against Salah, but he has had some performances where you question, how good his defending is. And so maybe he just thought it was time to bring in a guy with a little bit of experience, history with the club, an opportunity to kind of bring in someone he just felt could defend a little bit better. I'm not sure. It's hard to know exactly. I didn't watch any interviews with Nuno after the match, so I'm not sure what the takeaway is going to be there. But I think I was certainly surprised about Yates because it felt like the right kind of match. Maybe Everton was a better match just because of the physicality of that team. Thought that Yates would come in because you had said too, Greg, I think in our preview that you're just at the stage where you just feel like he could play every match and you'd be happy with that because ultimately he provides that steadiness and that consistency of form. And he's good about kind of getting everybody got it sort of galvanized and playing cohesively. He's like a manager on the pitch and as the club captain. So I was a bit shocked about that. I mean, as you stated, Dominguez's form has been great. He was one of the few players I thought that actually played decently against Everton. And he's just been on a good run in terms of his overall play. And as you said, he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife, and he can kind of do a lot of different things very well for the club. And but Danilo was, I think, the bigger surprise for me, just simply because he just doesn't seem to be himself. He didn't, in terms of not maybe being as fit as he needs to be, just given how long he had to be out. Still looked a little bit timid when it came to engagement on the tackle. But all of that went out the window last night. So in the end, I thought what Nuno chose to do, maybe resting a few players, for the match coming up on the weekend, I guess he really set things up strategically well, and they played the part, and they did exactly what they needed to do. Elanga putting in the minutes he needed to put in, Danilo putting in the minutes that he put in, and putting in good minutes too. Because I think on average, the majority of our team was a 7 out of 10 in that match.
What did you make of Danilo?
Yeah, I just thought he did a really good job. I thought, it was great. He was 5 out of 5 on his ground duels, right? Which I don't think you could say that. I haven't looked at the stats in terms of his previous, minutes that he's been on the pitch. In terms of that, it was just more of an optics thing, and watching him kind of be, not quite as desirous to stick a foot in and to really be physical with someone. But I thought his passing looked really crisp. I thought he was really decisive there. I mean, but I was just most impressed in terms of how he managed things on the defensive end. There was a couple of times like he was in the corner, in that far left corner, and I think on Kulusevski one time, and he completely neutralized him. And that's not an easy player to deal with, right? I mean, he's quick, he's agile, he's great on the ball. And he just completely neutralized him, and then he got the ball out beautifully. I mean, there was just he had those Danilo type moments from an offensive standpoint in terms of moving the ball forward. But I thought he showed a lot of desire and commitment to playing defensively last night that we need him to do, because he can be a guy who can play a 6. He can be a guy who play the 8. He's got some versatility that we need, and he provides that depth, because that was the question. What was he going to be going forward? Is he going to be in the plans going forward? And I think what he showed last night was, hey, I'm ready to get back. I'm ready to lock back in. I'm ready to play the way I know I can play. And having a guy like that in the stretch run that we need to have that depth when we've had some injuries recently that have taxed us a little bit is going to be enormous. And it just builds confidence, I think, going forward in terms of what he can provide when called upon.
Yeah, I was pleased with his output. Toffolo coming into the side, Paul, made me think, look, is he Nuno, that is he looking at Sunday? Because we've got a fullback issue with no Nico because he's suspended. Ola Aina, let's suggest that he's not going to make it. Let's suggest that he is fit, but Nuno thinks I need to save him for the league games. So is he now giving Toffolo a run out to get him up to speed? And I guess the question is, if he is doing that, I mean, bloody hell, it's a game away at Spurs where we really want to get the 3 points. So it's a little bit of a roll of the dice. No one really saw it coming. And Toffolo is such a great guy. We can talk about Toffolo as a person, and no one's got anything bad to say about him. But it's his first league start of the season. I mean, how surprised were you that he got that nod?
Yeah, I was surprised. I guess there's not really been any evidence to date to suggest that Nuno had a huge amount of faith in him to start a game like that. But, thinking back, Moreno did have a poor game against Everton. And I don't necessarily, want to lay too much blame at his door for that. Again, he's come in out of the cold recently, and, it possibly takes a while to sort of get up to speed. So, it was a surprising selection. I wonder if you're right. I don't know, but I wonder if there is half an eye on Sunday, thinking actually if we're going to use Toffolo and Moreno potentially. I mean, the question then is who would play on the right. I don't know. I don't think either of them have ever played on the right. Looking at, I had a quick Google on one or two sites that sort of come up with those sorts of stats. I don't think either of them ever played on the right. So if they do stick one of them on the right, then they're going to have a difficult job up against the likes of Doku, you would think. But I don't see too many other options unless he goes back to sort of what we did at Villa and play 3 at the back and Dominguez as a right wing back, which didn't really work.
That's not gonna
Look, who knows what was the deciding factor in his mind, but I think as I say, given the clearance that he made, which is certainly as important as a goal contribution when you look at it in the cold light of day, that you have to say it was a good move to bring Toffolo in. And yes, there was lots of crosses come in. I don't think whether if Moreno had been there, would that have been any different? I'm not sure it would have been. Surprising selection. I think going back to the Danilo one, I definitely think there's half an eye on the weekend, given that Yates won't play against City. It's an opportunity to get an hour in Danilo's legs, thinking that if which I think he will, go with that formation where we have an extra body in the middle of the park and probably sacrifice Hudson-Odoi at least to start the game. Then it has to be Danilo alongside Anderson and Dominguez, you would think, given that Sangare didn't get any minutes at all last night. So that made sense to me, in that Danilo starting ahead of Yates in order to get him up to speed for Sunday. So arguably with both of them, there's definitely an element of that within the thinking.
I mean, I'll stick with you, Paul, because you brought him up. I was going to ask about Sangare, because it's surely that's the end of his Forest career now. I can't imagine that he's going to be here next season. He's not getting any bench time, minutes off the bench, that is. And last night in the second half, I think we even had a sub remaining. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I thought, what can we do? I think we bought Sosa on, didn't we, in the end?
Yeah.
But even before that, I thought, what can we do to really kind of get some solidity in our ranks? And Sangare was on the bench. We could have brought him on. You could have even said, you know what, I'm just going to go so defensive that it's 5-5. He didn't even do that. Are we going to see Sangare in a Forest shirt again, Paul?
I think we might see him sporadically off the bench between now and the end of the season, but I don't think doesn't feel like he's anywhere near starting a game. And you'd have to think that come the summertime, I mean, there's all sorts of, going off on a tangent, people like Douglas Luiz and names like that, which have been thrown around over the last few months. You would think pedigree-wise, given what we've seen from Sangare since he's been with us, that they're thinking elsewhere. Which is, on the one hand, is a shame, because came obviously with a lot of promise and a reputation, and it might just be the case that he does go somewhere else and he kicks on and he has a good career, and potentially at this level. It's just for whatever reason hasn't worked out for him at Forest. Obviously injuries have played a part in that. He's just never seemed to get in any rhythm whatsoever. I think the one game that I can remember him thinking he's arrived was, I think, Newcastle away last year, when Wood scored that hat-trick. And then, of course, straight after that, he went to AFCON, came back with whatever complications he came back with from that. And he's never really, apart from, I think he started the first 2 games this season, 2 or 3 games, where he looked okay, albeit against probably opposition that, in reflection was the weaker end of the league that we played against in those first couple of games. So, it's hard to see him getting himself back into the side certainly as a starter. And actually, if you think if he is as good as potentially what we thought he was going to be. And if he believes in himself still, then he's probably wanting to go somewhere that's going to give him regular football, be it in this country or somewhere else in Europe.
Yeah. Okay, Richard. Forest, they always seem to do well when we get the first goal. It's kind of what we built our season on, getting that first goal, and either building on it quickly with a second, which we did last night, or just then reverting straight into closure time. So again, an early goal from Anderson. I mean, he hasn't scored enough goals for me this season. I know he's still developing. I'm not digging him out because he's a wonderful player and he was really, really good last night. But he does, I think, need to add a few more goals to his repertoire. And yeah, we got a bit of a lucky deflection with that, but you make your own luck. So just take us through the goal and how important do you feel that Anderson will be for us for the rest of the season?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see, what his progression looks like, his development looks like, because as he adds goals, I think he, clearly that breeds confidence in himself, that he has that in his locker to do that. I mean, we've seen players on our squad like, Anthony Elanga is a perfect example of that. Be such a dynamic player. He can be good, but then he can shift to great when he starts getting more confidence. I'm sure that's the case for a lot of players, but it's especially evident, it seems like, with Anthony. So yeah, I mean, he's certainly got it within him. I think he's, him and Morgan kind of both suffer from being probably a little lackluster on the shooting side of things. Morgan, again, last night missed I think a golden opportunity on that ball from Wood over the middle in the second half, and he put it wide, quite wide actually, and sliced it, further away from goal than I anticipated when I first saw it. And then when you watch it back, it's like, man, that wasn't even close. But yeah, he's going to be a huge part of the future, I think, because we don't know what's going to happen, both in terms of how he progresses through the remainder of the season, if he can put for more performances like that, because he did every phase of the game well. Scored, passed it. I mean, he almost had an assist to Wood, right? There was a lot to like about the way that he played, comprehensively last night, and those are the kind of performances that become more of the norm. He's going to be, knocking on the door of that England squad for sure, because he does offer a lot. The question becomes too, for me, is like shifting into the offseason, does Man City take the bait and actually go after Morgan and pay the £100 million? Because if that happens, he just feels like the most natural, even though he's been brilliant in an 8 position, he feels like the most natural player to fill in that role. But I thought it wasn't a great cross from Elanga, right? From a corner. It kind of did get a bit of a lucky sort of deflection going backwards. I was trying to look at it and go, okay, if he had struck that and it hadn't deflected, would that have gone in anyway? Because he did hit it pretty purely, and it certainly looked like from the angle that would have just rifled right into the top right, or to the, right near the post, inside the post for a clean goal. So it was one of the best strikes I've seen from him all season. Again, another one against, was it Southampton that he scored the first goal in? But to your point about that first goal, it really just sets the tone for how Forest want to play, because invariably they can start to dictate things a little bit more, even if it becomes a situation like it was in the second half where they start to bed in a little bit, start to play, a little further back, let them come at us. If they don't have the guys on the end of it, because even Solanke hasn't played to his level that we've seen him play in previous seasons, they just don't quite have them. Richarlison's a very good player, but he certainly hasn't done as well as you've seen him do in the past either. So it probably felt like, hey, we can do this. We can absorb the pressure against a team like this, because they just don't have the finishing quality. Brennan's the leading goal scorer, I think, at 11. And so everything kind of played in our hands, as we've seen many, many times, as you alluded to in previous matches. Once that first goal goes in, and especially if we get that second one, and now things start to, as Paul referenced, their confidence starts to wane. They're not getting the backing from their home crowd. Things start to go south for them. They kept being relentless, but there really wasn't a whole lot at the end of it. I think we had one near miss with a cross where Richarlison, I think Sarr was on the back post, and he just did not position himself well for that header, because it felt like kind of a sitter, and he just completely mistimed it. Thankfully, those kinds of moments never manifested and came to fruition for them, along with a number of great saves from Matt Sells. But yeah, I thought Anderson's key to everything we're doing the rest of the season as well as going forward. And man, they made every effort to try to take him out of the game. I don't know how many times he got swiped. It was unbelievable, but yeah. Anyway. No,
he's key for us. I thought the first 15, 20 minutes, we were very good and exploited Spurs being so open. And that was clearly where the game was won. and they allowed us the space, and they allowed us to play. And Forest are quite happy to play football and to come on and try and grab the goal. And it's only once we've got the goal or two that you see us kind of shutting up shop. And time again, after the game is finished, you get the opposition fans or fans of other competitors coming out on social media saying, "Oh God, Forest are the worst team in the league to watch. I've watched Forest 5 times this season and they're so boring. How can they be third?" And all that kind of stuff. And then there's the other one, is all the Ryan Yates stuff comes out, and it's a joy to watch. And long may it continue. But there were signs there, Paul, that actually we could open them up a little bit more significantly than we did. Chris Wood was marginally offside, and I said on this podcast, I think when we had Max Scott on, Wood's back. I think we did the Wood intro, didn't we? I said, look, Wood's back. He's got to get back on the score sheet now. And I think we saw much more of the Chris Wood we've seen all season last night, Paul. With that goal that was disallowed, definitely, marginally. That was a lovely finish. And then, of course, then with the goal, the header, it was a pure Chris Wood goal, but also a word for the Murillo move, the free kick down to Alanga. And that cross from Alanga, again, I think again, he's assisting Wood. I think that's his 14th goal contribution, assistant goals mixed. He did 14 this season, did 14 last season. Since he's been with us, 28 contributions, which is a great number. So, how amazing is it that Wood's back on 19 goals, and is he going to push us over the line?
Yeah, a couple of things there. I think on Chris Wood, first of all, I think if you'd have been in a coma for the last 4 or 5 weeks and you turned up and watched last night's game, you would never known he'd been away. He slotted. It was like, as you say, it was like Chris Wood of a month or two ago before he got injured. So that was brilliant to see. Clinical, he was not just in and around the box, but he was winning balls in the air from goal kicks that he wasn't doing at the weekend on against Everton. So yeah, brilliant to see him back, and as you say, on the score sheet as well, which would be a big confidence boost for him for the rest of the season. On the free kick, I was at the opposite end, sort of behind the Selzer's goal and a bit to the side, and you could see it coming. I mean, we've played that. We've sort of tried that once or twice before.
Yeah.
And I said to my son, Alanga's going to run here, and Morilla's going to. You could see it coming, and Tottenham were asleep, and nobody sort of tracked him, and yeah, great whipped ball in with pace. Obviously, I think the commentators were suggesting from the highlights I've seen back that goalkeeper could have done better, and yeah, maybe he could have. But I think when you ask questions like when you put such a quality ball into that area, then you're going to have to commit the goalkeeper, and if he doesn't get there, then obviously Wood's got an open goal. Even if he'd have stayed in his line, the keeper, the header was right in the corner, so yeah, arguably wouldn't have saved that. I think going back to your point, Rich, I'm pretty sure that Anderson's shot was arrowing into that top corner as well. So if anything, the deflection on his shot, gave Vicario a chance to save it rather than, so it almost helped Spurs rather than hindered them. But go back to Wood. Brilliant to see him back in amongst the goals. The offside one was interesting because it's funny now in the ground they show the obviously the semi-automated image, the sort of 3D image that they show, and on that when it came up, it looked really, really close. Maybe it was the angle that I was sat in the screen. Even everyone around me was going, "Whoa, crikey, that really, really tight." And actually, when I've watched it now, the highlights on TV, it looks much clearer offside on the TV pictures than it did on the semi-automated sort of image. So that was a bit strange, but I guess something we're all going to have to get used to, I guess, going forward is those images and how to sort of decipher them. But
I thought it was offside straight away, and I thought clear offside. It still took them ages to say it was offside. It's got to be quicker, isn't it? It's got to be quicker.
Agree. Yeah, because it looked like everyone was sort of regrouping in the middle, and all of a sudden the referee picked the ball up, and I was like, "Oh, hang on a second, here we go." But obviously it didn't matter in the end. I think that was really crucial. Despite the disappointment of having that ruled out, it was only 3 or 4 minutes later he scored again. So and I think particularly against a team like Spurs, who we know are fragile, to get the 2-goal early start, even if it had been 1 goal, if it stayed 1-0 for a while, like I said. Despite the pressure and the possession they had, all the sort of voices around me were, they had no belief. There was mumbling and grumbling, and even it's every time they got the ball in, it's defenders there again. It's typical. We can't pick out our own. We can't pick out our own player from across. So I think it was just the state that they're at made those early goals such a key fit, as it would be in any game, but particularly against a fragile team like Spurs, it was a perfect start for Forest.
You're watching and listening to Talking Reds. He's a great man, Harry Toffolo. We'll talk more about him after this break.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Indeed, the perfect cheesy mix. You know what to do. The information is in the bio to this episode. Harry Toffolo, I know we've touched on him in his inclusion, Richard, and he did have a good game. I know that clearance off the line, everyone's cooing about it, and rightly so. And the fans serenading him. He said in the post-match interview that was a lovely moment for him personally because his son was there and family members were there. And, you know, I can only imagine that if you're a child and your dad's playing on the pitch and then there's a few thousand fans singing his name, you know, it must be really, really special. And for him to acknowledge that, again, just kind of makes you feel like, you know, we've got a real special relationship with Harry Toffolo. And whether or not he moves on at the end of the season, no, he's really written himself into the history of the club, you know, in terms of us coming out of the championship, and him coming as one of those first players and him playing a part in certain ways off the pitch as well. We know about his contribution to the mental health side of things. One thing he did say in the post-match interview as well was that Anthony Elanga going off at halftime was tactical. I know one or two people were worried, was that Anthony Elanga with a slight knock? You know, he said Elanga didn't really want to come off. He took it really, really well. It was tactical. It shows a lot about Anthony Elanga, but it also shows that Nuno went to the closure team on 45 minutes, which I'll be honest with you, I thought, God, is that a bit early? I know we're 2-0 up, but is that a bit early? Maybe 60 minutes, but he chose to go to Morato time at halftime, and maybe had Nuno left it a couple of minutes, he might have thought, again, because they took off Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero, they're two centre-backs as well. So, you know, there was a few changes going on at half-time, and so maybe Nuno would have thought differently. But firstly, on the Elanga change at half-time and Morato coming on, did that unnecessarily mean that we just took a step back? And as many crosses were going in before halftime and they weren't capitalising on them, you touched on the Richarlison chance that he got a bit of a muddle on. And if it had gone to Sarr would have been offside. So Richarlison got ahead on it and he went wide. But, you know, the warning signs were there. He got on the end of a cross that Sells saved magnificently in the second. So, well, we kind of almost digging ourselves a bit of a hole here. I know that we are masters at bringing Morato on and dealing with, you know, teams in that locked formation, if you like. It was more of a low block than we've seen from Forest. I know that Forest go defensively and they go to switch into out of possession, but they do tend to just come up the pitch a little bit more of that. It did seem more of a low block last night and a little bit more like flying by the seat of our pants. So was that potentially a move too early to bring Morato on at half time for you?
Initially, I thought it was, just simply because we've seen situations in the past where if you take that approach too early, right? Do you, as you've said, do you relinquish to the thing that we do the best, which is, well, one of the things that we do the best, which is to be able to counter, and knowing how they tend to have a really high line, right, in opposition to what we typically do. That you felt like an Elanga was doing a good job of getting behind that at different intervals and creating problems for them. And then if you take a guy off the pitch like a Van de Ven, who is incredibly fast, probably one of the few that could probably match Elanga stride for stride, as well as being a good defender. It feels like you're going to give yourself a chance to kind of exploit that, but it's hard to answer that question in a sense because you've already seen how things unfolded. You saw the outcome. So, but I would say that it did feel intuitively a little bit too early. It felt like we were capitulating a little bit too early. But knowing how we like to play, understanding the kind of success we had in the first half, even with a minimum number of touches in the box, even with trying to deal with the crosses coming in. Knowing that Morato, I mean, I would say that's another thing. He's not great in the air, and so the question becomes: if they're trying to attack us through that through that medium, then is he the best person to really bring in for that? Because that might create more of a problem in the middle of the pitch, but it didn't in the middle of the box rather. And so I think Nuno got it right in retrospect. He certainly is trying to, as we've said. I mean, Anthony, depending on how severe that knock was that he had, he's didn't play very well against Everton. He clearly didn't look like himself. And so maybe in the back of his mind, saying, you know what, I understand you can probably see this out. You can probably play the majority of the second half, but I'd rather have you fresher against Man City, because a team like that, you're going to need all of your weapons in order to beat them, and you're going to need them at 100%. So I'm sure there's some thinking of that. Like you said, there was tactical reasons for that. One, because he probably just didn't feel like Spurs had it in them to really break the line and actually score. And so he felt like this was the appropriate time to bring Morato in, and then at the same time save Anthony for the coming match against Man City. But yeah, I was, like I said, intuitively, I was a little bit worried that we might be giving into the low block too quickly and not allowing ourselves the opportunity to add a third. Because I think once you add a third, to me, that's the nail in the coffin. You're really they're done. They're not going to be able to come back from that. So that was a bit of a fear that maybe we conceded a little bit too quickly.
Yeah, because I worry with 2 goals. We've seen it where we scored 3 against Southampton and we then let them back to 3-2. We've seen it where we can concede a goal against Newcastle. We did it. We did it in other games as well, where we concede and we concede again really quickly. Did it against Villa as well, didn't we? So my worry is that once you pop, that's it. It's all, once you've broken the seal with Forest, sometimes it can be our frailty, our kind of Achilles heel, that we've let a goal in. So I was worried at 2-0 that if they score, that they're going to get another one. And it really was, to coin the phrase, squeaky bum time. Once Richarlison had scored that goal, and I was really annoyed. I wanted another clean sheet for Sales. I really value him beyond any words I can say, like we all do. What he's done for us this season, I think he's been magnificent, and I'd love him to finish with the clean sheet record for the season. I know he's still in the lead, but first and foremost, it's victories, Paul, that count. It's 3 points that count. When you look back on the season, those go, oh, well, you didn't really play well in that game. You didn't really play well in that game. Well, you were lucky in that game. It's about accruing the points that matter, isn't it? It's about getting over the line and finding a way to do it. And the resilience and the bounce back ability of Forest this season has been remarkable. So we see the game out. We let them get back in with it with a header. Let's just talk about 1 or 2 other players before we move on. Awoniyi back on the bench, coming off and getting some minutes to kind of relieve Chris Wood at the end. Did you see anything from Awoniyi that kind of made you, I don't know, smile? Were you positive about that? Did you see anything from him that made you think, yeah, he's got a contribution to make still? Yeah,
I think he does have a I think if even if his only contribution between now and the end of the season is giving Chris Wood 15 minutes, 20 minutes of rest every game, if you multiply that over the 6-7 games we've got left, and that's effectively Wood playing 1 game less than if he plays 90 minutes in all the games. So for that reason alone, it's great to have Taiwo back. I think when he came on, there's one in particular clearance that he outmuscled a couple of people, held it up, and again, people around me getting frustrated. Oh, how can you manage to hold off 2 or 3 of them? But that's what he does. So he did do that. It was a bit of a release valve once or twice when the ball was cleared up to him, and obviously right at the end when he took it into the corner, which was after he'd tried a wonder volley from the edge of the area, completely missed his kick, and actually then come to his senses and go, actually, right now, I just need to go to the corner, win a free kick, and then so really, actually, in terms of going back to your point about after we conceded last night, I don't think after their goal, they really threatened. I mean, we actually did manage that injury time as well as I can think we managed any injury time this season. And particularly at the end of the game, the whistle blew with the ball up at the right end of the pitch from our perspective, and it had been up there for a good minute or two. So from that perspective alone, then I think Taiwo definitely does have something to offer. Whether we'll see him, getting on the score sheet or not, I think it doesn't look like he's got a huge amount of goals in him, but we've seen before he scores quite unconventional goals. He sort of seems to bundle them in. So if the situation presents himself, then I'd love nothing more than for Taiwo to get himself on the score sheet between now and the end of the season once or twice. But like I said at the start, even if it's just for the case of it allows us to give Wood 15-20 minutes rest, particularly if in situations like we were last night when he brought him off and we were 2-0 up, or we've got that cushion. That's the perfect scenario to get Taiwo on for 15-20 minutes, get his legs moving, and also, as I say, give Wood a rest. So for that reason alone, then it's pleasing to see.
Forest do go back to third in the table. There it is on the screen. It's just on the screen because I like seeing us in third. It really wasn't a pleasant thing to see us drop down to 6, because had we lost last night again, we'd still be there. And we've been getting written off again, and Old Forest have slipped, and back-to-back defeats and so on. So, we are in third on 60 points. Man City play Villa tonight, Richard. I mean, just quickly, we won't spend too much time on this. Just quickly, what do you want to see from that game tonight? Does it suit us for City to win? And go back above us again, but just keep Villa below. Is it about keeping Chelsea and Villa below us now, do you think?
I mean, maybe that's not the right way to look at it but I would agree with that. I feel like we need to limit the number of competing teams in this particular area. Ideally, it's just unfortunate that it can't both be losing, but based off of that fact, clear and obvious fact, I would probably rather see City win, just so Villa can try to drop off a little bit, because they've just been the form team in Europe, I think is what they were saying on Forest Focus yesterday. And so, just try, as we've talked about, create sort of a mini league between and amongst these, third to seventh, and just really hopefully eliminate at least one or two of those teams, so that it just becomes a little bit easier to manage from our perspective, at least shifting the pressure away a little bit. And that's what getting those 3 points last night did. It really just kind of didn't completely alleviate the pressure on us. We've still got to continue to play well and see this out and get those next 5 to 6 points over the next 5 matches in order to try to secure that position, at least in 5th, and to get into the Champions League. So I hate both of those teams, but I would prefer, I guess, at this stage, because I just don't see Man City slowing down likely, at least eliminate one of those teams that are in good form. And hopefully that does that to Villa to a degree.
Big Arn says
I mean, I take that too, of course.
Yeah, but what about you, Paul? Just quickly, what would you prefer, a draw tonight, or do you think let's let Man City go and let's try and eliminate Chelsea and Villa?
Yeah, some interesting subplots around this game, isn't there, and permutations. Because if you're thinking solely about the league, then I think I tend to err with and agree with you guys that let's just get as much distance between ourselves and the teams in 6th and 7th as we possibly can. So therefore, and from that perspective, you want City to win. A draw means that we obviously stay third. If City win, then we drop down to 4th. And obviously that would mean that if it was a draw, we go into this cup game against City ahead of them in the league, still the highest ranked team in the cup, and all that sort of stuff. I know it doesn't really mean anything, but it's quite a nice little thing to say. If, on the other hand, if Villa were to win tonight, then City are under big pressure. Then they're out of the top 5. What does that do to their mindset going into the cup game at the weekend? They've got a lot of noise around, and I know that they've got some pretty favourable fixtures. They've got Southampton to play, so chances are they're going to get back on track. So you can almost look at whichever way it goes tonight, you can put a positive spin on it. I think for Forest, I think for me, I think the league Champions League thing is still my number one aim, as opposed to winning the cup, although a cup win would be absolutely brilliant. So I think I'd all things considered, City win, but actually if either of the other two happen, then there's a positive spin you can put on it for sure.
It's a difficult one. I think I am erring on the side that I would prefer a Man City victory, just purely because I think they're going to finish in the top 5 anyway. And also, I still think that Forest should only focus on what we do. So we would have a game in hand still on Man City, and we should still win that, I think, against Brentford. I know it's a tough game. Everyone who knows me knows that I think we're going to win every game. But obviously, I do think that we'll beat Brentford at home. Our home games are really, really crucial. So I think that we can allow City to win, if you like, tonight, and win our Brentford game and go back above them, and so on and so on and so on. But look, the bottom line is that it's about finishing in the top 5 now. Of course, I want to finish third. I want us to finish as high as possible, because I don't want to get into the Champions League in 5th and people say, oh, you only got in the Champions League because there was an extra space. If it happens that way, then so be it. Sod it. We've deserved it. But I'd love us to finish third. But I'd love even more for us to do both. I've been saying for a long time that we can do both. And we'll talk about the semi-final in just a moment. We've got a bit of time before we do that, just to have a bit more of a focused look at the run-in then. So we are talking about the run-in a bit more. So we've got Brentford on May the 1st in match week, game week 34. Newcastle will play Ipswich. You'd expect them to win that. Of course, we know that Man City are playing Villa tonight and Chelsea play Everton. So, Richard, just kind of taking a look at the set of fixtures, I think Man City's fixtures aren't too bad. Some might say I quite like our running, to be honest with you. Chelsea's are Everton, Liverpool, Newcastle, Man U and us. I think Chelsea have got potentially the toughest run-in. Villa are playing catch-up, remember. So it's all well and good saying these run-ins are this or these run-ins are that. If you are playing catch-up, then you still have to hope that teams around you will slip up. So if you now have to pick 3rd, 4th and 5th, let's say Liverpool 1st, Arsenal 2nd, what are you predicting at this point in time for a 3rd, 4th and 5th? Richard Spray.
I'm probably going towards Man City being in 3rd, based off of the fixtures that they have, because I think they've got a favorable fixture, obviously, at home against Villa. Then they play Wolves at home. So they've got, 3 home matches like we do, but then they've got Southampton sandwiched in between some of those matches, and we've obviously got Leicester. So there's some opportunity, I think, for them to continue to move up. And I think given their current state, I just don't see them slowing down. And so I would imagine they'll end up 3rd. And I think when I was doing some predictions in my own spreadsheet, I had them at 3rd as well, behind Liverpool and Arsenal. After that, I would probably say that it's going to be a bit of a fight to finish 4th between us and Newcastle. So I'm going to say that we finish 4th, because I think some of their latter fixtures towards the last 3 weeks are a little bit more manageable than what Newcastle has. I mean, Everton, as we've already determined, is not an easy team to play, even if they're playing Newcastle's playing them at home, because we obviously played them at home and they gave us one of the most difficult matches we've had all season. So I can see them starting to kind of slip towards the latter 3 weeks. Now, unfortunately, that means Chelsea potentially picks up some points, but I'm hoping at least in that match they get a draw. So I'm going to say we finish 4th, and I'm going to say Newcastle finishes 5th.
Okay. Paul, anything different from you?
Yeah, let me dissect and work it out. So I think coming back to our running, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago that ahead of the Everton game. So what I think what wanted us to try and achieve was to be on 66 points going into that last game against Chelsea, which meant that we had 6 games, as I said before, Everton, Spurs, obviously, which are now those 2 are out of the way, and it was a question of getting 3 points from each pair of games. So we've got 3 from the first pair, next pair being Brentford and Palace, next pair after that being Leicester and West Ham. So out of those 4 games, you would feel that 6 points is eminently achievable. Everyone's saying that Leicester's going to be a shoo-in. I mean, it's interesting, as that game gets closer, the narrative will shift slightly in that, let's not take this for granted. This could be the most difficult game of the season. They're not going to want.
They're down now, so the pressure's off, and
true. And obviously they're not going to want to give us, a moment in the sun, are they? So park that thought for now. But let's get a 66 before we play Chelsea and see where that leaves us. I do think that weekend when we play Leicester. And Chelsea and Newcastle play each other, and City have got to go to Bournemouth, who I appreciate they're not in the Champions League race anymore, but they're very, very much in the Europa League race and or Conference League, whatever it may be, that's going to get 8th place. So they're fighting for their first European jaunt, which is going to be massive for them. So that's certainly not an easy game for Villa. So that, I think, could be the pivotal weekend where everything sort of really does shift in our favour. Because obviously, Newcastle and Chelsea clearly can't both win that weekend. They possibly both might drop points. And like I say, I think Villa's trip to Bournemouth is going to be a tricky one. So I would back us to finish in the top 5. I whether that be 3rd, 4th, or 5th, I'm not sure. But I think last night was a huge step towards securing top 5. And like you, Greg, I think particularly if we can beat Brentford, then massive. Every game from now on is going to feel like the biggest game to the end of the season. But I think if you're going back to that whole having it as a pair of games, Brentford Palace being a pair, if you can win the first one of those pair, it just takes the pressure off the second one. Similarly, if we can beat Leicester, it takes a bit of pressure off the West Ham game. So, let's see. I'm still confident. But I think actually one thing which we haven't actually really said yet is that I think last night pretty much guarantees us European football of some colour. Yeah, I don't think it quite does. I think there's a permutation where theoretically everybody else could win all their games. Fulham, Bournemouth, etc. could win all their games, but in reality, last night has confirmed that we all are going to be getting our passports out and going somewhere in September, October, November, be it far-flung corner of Azerbaijan if it's the Conference League, or hopefully more like Juventus or Barcelona or somewhere like that if it's the Champions League.
I did a thing online where you can put all the teams' fixtures in and do all the results for everybody, and it gives you the final table. And I was trying to be as non-biased as possible. But I had Forest finishing 3rd, Man City finishing 4th, and Newcastle finishing 5th, with Villa 6th and Chelsea in 7th. We did a bit of a plot, didn't we, a few weeks ago, when Scott was on with us. We thought we might get 3 points at home to Everton. We didn't get any. We said we'd get a point away at Spurs, and we got 3. So it kind of ties in with what you were saying, Paul, about those taking those games in pairs and trying to get at least 3 points out of the pair of games. So up next in the league, it is Brentford on Thursday, the 1st of May. That's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff, and then we go on the 5th of May to Crystal Palace for an 8 p.m. kickoff. So a couple more evening fixtures coming up. But the next game, and we've got a few minutes to talk about it, the next game on Forest's calendar is the trip to Wembley on Sunday. And, well, did we ever imagine, Richard Spray, at the start of this season, that going into the last week of April, we'd not only be sat 3rd in the Premier League, but we'd be playing in an FA Cup semi-final? It's been a magnificent season. What are your hopes ahead? We're going to do a full Wembley preview later in the week, but just briefly, what are your hopes going into Sunday?
Clearly, I hope we're going to make it. We want to try to avenge that. Paul showed us his banner from the '91 final, and I remember that very vividly. And my cousin's a Tottenham fan, so I heard that for the next 10 years of my life. But it was it definitely feels possible. I think what I'd like to see, and maybe this is just me being, just resigning myself to something, but I ultimately just want to see a performance. I want to see us really play to the level we know we're able to, and continue this sort of momentum of good performances after what we saw, at least second half of Villa, clearly what we didn't see at Everton, but at least getting back to playing a little bit closer to what we're used to, even if the second half was a bit uneventful from how we approach the from the offensive standpoint. But I just want to see a performance and see us do what we did to City when we played them at home recently, and really take it to them and not play fearful, and just show we're ready to see this last stretch out, even if we don't end up winning the FA Cup, which I strongly believe we have a chance to do. As you've pointed out, Greg, as well, it would be remarkable to see, but it's just like for us to do that, because that's the way this season has gone. It's been a season of miracles, right? We're we're returning to something that we were used to when we were kids, Greg, and when Paul was younger. And so it's great to have that moment to finally spotlight this club, which we're a much bigger club than most people give us credit for, as many of us have said. And I think that only cements it if we can move on to the final. I tend to believe we'll do it. I tend to it's going to be a difficult fixture or different match to see out, given the quality of who they have on their team. But with Foden being down a little bit, Holland certainly not playing to his level, there's every reason to believe we can do it. And I tend to err on that. I've doubted this team before, and they've proved me wrong time and time again. And I'm expecting the same thing on Sunday. But at least, as I said, I just want to see a very, very solid performance leading into that Brentford match, so that we come away with a little bit of positivity, even if we don't come away with a victory.
Thank you as ever to Mark Wayway NFFC for another £2 donation. We can't thank you enough, mate. You're so kind. Pre-match beers and the torch on Sunday, he says. One thing I wish for Sunday, Richard, is that you were here to go to the match with us. I know that that's not possible, and if we get to the final, that might be a different case. But I'm looking forward to meeting up with Paul Morley and Raf and Danscape. It's going to be a little bit of a Talking Reds get-together, but we'll be thinking of you, of course. So we'll be getting together for a few pre-match beers, Paul, won't we? I know that obviously we want to win the game on a Sunday, but more than that, I want us to put in a performance we can be proud of. I know that we have a style of play, and I know that I don't really want us to change that style of play. It's been successful, but I just want us to turn up. We didn't turn up against Everton. We didn't turn up in the first half against Villa. We didn't turn up in the first half against Newcastle. We didn't turn up at Fulham when we were there together as well. So there have been games when we haven't turned up, and Wembley is not the day or the occasion to have another one of those. So beyond just winning the game, what are you hoping for, Paul?
Yeah, I think we will turn up, and I think the crowd will play a massive part in that as well. I said this a few times. This is going to be City's 28th Wembley appearance in 14 years, which is must be the case. That must be, aside from the Etihad, the stadium they must have played most games in, because you don't visit your opponents twice a year in the league. So Wembley's effectively been their second home for the last 14 years or so. So for that reason, fan apathy, Forest fans are going to be bang up for it, and that will, I think, just demand a performance from the team. The energy from the crowd will filter through to the players, and they will put in a performance. Whether it be enough to take us through, who knows? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you'll get into it later in the week, but Aina likely to be missing, and obviously Yates suspended, Williams suspended, does give us quite a few headaches selection-wise. So I think if we were going into this game, if we'd have been drawn against Palace, there'd been a very different type of expectation and pressure on Forest. I think there isn't a huge amount of, certainly from the outside, all the pundits will be thinking that City are going to win. So I think the pressure is off, and we've seen, so many times this season when that's the case, when we are the underdogs, that we come out on top, and it suits us. So I think we can just go into the game with no fear, with optimism, with not even expectation, but just expectation of a good performance and a brilliant day out for the fans, and memories to be made, be it that we're reflecting on a defeat or a victory. We still then come after that game, and we've got a hugely positive few weeks to look forward to. So, this Sunday isn't going to define our season, whereas it might well define Man City's. There's a huge amount, much more pressure on them. So the only thing they can win, finishing 4th or 5th in the league is not good enough for them. That's a failure for them. So there's a huge amount of pressure on them compared to us. I just think we go into it with a smile on our face, with no fear, and what will be, and hopefully, that's a good outcome.
I'm an old romantic, and I believe in the old adage that sometimes your name's on the cup. And I've had that feeling, and I've said it before about Forest, and I know that I'm completely biased, but it's just something magical about Forest, that when it really happens, and it would just be the most Forest thing for us to qualify for Europe twice in the same season by getting into the top 4, finishing 3rd, and getting Champions League, and winning the FA Cup and qualifying for the Europa League at the same time. It would just be the most Forest thing for it to come along like that. So I'm firmly in the camp that we go to Wembley on Sunday. And it may well be another penalty shootout. And if it happens that way, it happens that way. It's about getting through. That's
would
the
you
most
take that
important
now?
thing.
If someone offered you a penalty shootout now, would you take it?
100%. 100 million billion %. I'd take a penalty shootout now. I think most fans, because you know what, with our penalty shootout record, you know, you take it, don't you?
Yeah.
So I want to say to all listening and watching, if you're going to Wembley on Sunday, travel safely. We're going to be back on Friday with Dan Scape and Raf, the random pundit, with Richard and I to do the Wembley preview. So please tune in for that. There'll be other previews going out this week from various other Forest podcasts. So I encourage you to watch them all because the content across the board is always brilliant and we support everybody, of course. Thank you for tuning in today to listen to our Spurs review. Paul Morley, is there anything final you want to say? Because you always like to come up with a one more thing every now and again. So any one more thing?
I might have one. Yeah, so I think we are 4 or 5 wins away from arguably, you know, being in the top 5 seasons in the whole club's history. And if we win the FA Cup and if we finish in the top 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to call it, only for me, only the 2 seasons where they won the European Cup and won the league are going to eclipse that. Closest to that was probably 89, where we finished 3rd and won the 2 cups, the League Cup and the Simod Cup, as it was. I think if we win the FA Cup and finish 3rd, I think this or 4th even, or even 5th, and get in the Champions League, I think that eclipses that. So it's a real opportunity for an absolute. And we talk about it's already a magical season, but literally one of the top seasons in the club's history. And also, we are now on 96 Premier League wins since football was reinvented in 1992. So imagine if we go into that last game against Chelsea, we're on 99 wins, and that would be an opportunity. What a way to round off the season that would be, to get to 100 Premier League wins, confirm our Champions League spot. And I imagine if we win 4 between now and the end of the season, that's probably going to be enough for 3rd. So let's all keep the positivity. Have a fantastic day on Sunday, whether you're there or whether you're watching on TV or in the pub. And if you are there, then you know, it'd be great to bump into people and say hi. So can't wait for it. Bring it on.
Thanks very much, Paul. Always a pleasure to have you. Richard Spray, like I said, I wish you could be there on Sunday with us, mate, but we're going to the final, so you better start raiding that bank account for a bit of FA Cup final hospitality. What do you reckon?
There you go. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to do that. Never been to Wembley, so that would be an incredible experience to kind of add another little check mark to my bucket list in life. And I do want to say something about Chris Wood. I think it was brought up in the match. I believe they said he's on 88 goals now. And so in the Premier League. And so to Paul's point, how remarkable, one, to get to the 100th victory this season. He probably won't reach it this season, but potentially to see Chris Wood get to that 100 goal club in the Premier League and do it with Forest, I think would be magical, right? Just a great way to round off his career, because what an asset he's been, an unexpected of all these things that we can list off this season in particular that we are just being blown away by and amazed by in terms of what our club is doing. Nuno being on that list in terms of how he's managed the team and what he's done. Because I know, Greg, we had our doubts, right, at certain moments last season as to whether he was going to be the guy for us, and he's far exceeded that. And I think it was even Danscape who said in our predictions that the biggest surprise of the season was going to be Nuno. So well done, Dan, for predicting that. But yeah, just the idea of what Chris Wood has meant to our club. It's just remarkable. It's remarkable to see him sort of have a bit of a renaissance, you know, from feeling like he was probably reaching the tail end of his career in English football to suddenly just flip that with the help of Nuno, I'm sure, in the way that he sets the team up to maximize his skill set. But it's just going to be a great thing next season because he'll reach that mark. I have no doubt he'll reach that mark next season. So well done, Chris.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Richard. Please do
go ahead and hit like and subscribe to be sure not to miss any future episodes from Talking Reds.
Yeah, please do hit like and subscribe. Okay, guys, that wraps things up. Harry Toffolo was back last night in the starting lineup for the first time, and what a performance he gave us. Chris Wood was back, and what a great game for him to get back on the score sheet with his 19th goal. And on Sunday, Forest are back at Wembley yet again. Bounce back ability, you better believe
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talk.